Hey everybody, Dr. Gretchen Reese here, Integrity Wellness MD. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes today about peptides. Peptides are all the rage, everybody's talking about it, and it's filling our social media feeds. And it's pretty common that we get patients coming in, and after we talk about their hormones and gut health and nutrition, they say, so I heard about peptides, should I be on peptides? And I always smile and say, yes, that's a great question, but there is no quick answer to that. The answer is maybe. But there's a couple of things that you need to know to understand about peptides if you're asking yourself, should I take a peptide? First of all, you have to know what they are. So peptides are basically small proteins. So a protein is a string of amino acids all linked together. And if you chop that up into little bits of anywhere from, say, 3 to 20 amino acids, that's going to be a peptide. So basically like mini proteins. And these are everywhere. So they're in all of our bodies. Interestingly, we all have about 7,000 endogenous peptides, which means naturally occurring in the body. But there have actually been over 50,000 peptides that have been studied and identified and looked at for clinical purposes. So there's a lot of peptides that exist. Out of those 50,000, about 200 to 400 have actually been studied in clinical trials for humans. So out of the big group, it gets whittled down into, some that have been studied. And then there's actually about 80 to 100 that have ended up being FDA approved as medications. So there are already a lot of peptides that are not only out there and available, but they're FDA approved medications that we've been using for years. So peptides are nothing really new. The other thing you have to understand about peptides is that they don't just make you feel great and amazing and have tons of energy and a sharp brain and feel like you're 20 years younger. They can have beneficial effects, but they're not usually hugely dramatic. And peptides have a lot of different functions. So they do a lot of different things, and that's why it's really hard to answer, should I take a peptide? So some of the most common reasons that we use peptides is muscle mass and muscle health. So to sort of combat the drop in muscle mass as we age, which is due to drop in human growth hormone, there are peptides that can support that muscle health and that muscle growth. Another common reason for using peptides is tissue recovery and repair. So recovery after a heavy workout or after an injury, and in particular joint, ligament, tendon injuries, and even wound healing. So there are peptides that can augment your body's natural healing response. And there's some pretty cool clinical applications of that and some data on that reason. Other reasons, though, that you may not be aware of is scalp hair regrowth. So if you have hair thinning with aging, blood glucose regulation, of course, we've heard about like Ozempic for diabetes, weight loss, certainly with Wegovy, Manjaro, some of the GLP-1 medications. Cellular energy. So there's a peptide in particular that helps support mitochondrial health, which is an important component of cellular energy. General immune health, there have been a number of studied for that. Sexual health, cognitive decline, and even for sleep. So there's a wide range of uses for peptides. So I just wanted to go over three main categories at this time. Note this information is going to change at some point, but as of right now, there's three different kinds of peptides that are out there, three categories. The first is those that are FDA approved and already on the market as commercial medications. Most of these are going to be forms of insulin. Bet you didn't know insulin was actually a peptide, and it's a peptide that we all have in our bodies. But insulin that diabetics use, that's a form of peptide. And that includes other diabetic drugs like Saxenda and Ozempic, that have been used for some time for diabetes. Lupron is a hormone blocker that is used to treat endometriosis. It's a peptide. Forteo is a medication used for osteoporosis. It's another peptide. Pitocin is used to augment labor. Oxytocin, that's a peptide. And then there's one called bremelanotide, which is used for sexual health, and that one is also a peptide. So these are all commercially available medications you can get at your local pharmacy with a prescription from your doctor. But the second category of peptides is those that are legally available to be compounded by a licensed compounding pharmacy, but there is no FDA-approved version on the market. And these are okay. Now, your regular allopathic physician may not prescribe these. They may not know about them. A lot of us in functional medicine do, and we oftentimes will use the compounding pharmacies. So this includes NAD. That's kind of a hot topic and a hot product in the IV infusion world. And then some of its spin-offs like Niagen or nicotinamide riboside, that's for cognitive enhancement. GHK copper is often used topically for skin and for hair regrowth. Samorelin has been around for maybe 10 years or so as an HGH booster. Gonadorelin helps augment natural hormone levels, and Thymogen. Another one, just as a sidebar, is BPC 157 is not available to be compounded for injection. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's still not. But there is actually an oral capsule that's on the market. Doesn't work great, but it does do something. So these are in that group of compoundable, but they're not technically FDA approved in the compounded form. In particular, semaglutide and tirzepatide, it is FDA approved in the commercial forms, but the compounding pharmacies can make it. The third category of peptides, though, is the problematic category that hopefully the FDA is making changes and they're going to start opening this up for the rest of us. But we're still in the process of trying to lobby the FDA to bring some of these peptides back on the market, because several years ago the FDA suddenly put out a bulletin saying, sorry, you can't compound with any of these ingredients. And a bunch of us were like, what? This is crazy. Top of the list of that is that BPC 157 for injection. It's been a very powerful medication as injection to be used for, say, a month or so. If you have an injury or something like surgery where you just need a boost in your healing. So say you get a knee replacement or you dislocate your shoulder or something else happens, BPC for injection has shown really good results in our clinical experience at helping with that. We've lobbied the FDA, and doctors as a whole have tried to convince the FDA to get that back on the compoundable list. It's called the bulks list. And the recent meeting that the FDA had, they did respond favorably. So we think that that's coming back at some point soon. But the other ones that are on this list where you still cannot legally get this, even with a prescription, because the pharmacies don't have it, CJC 1295, Ipamorelin, both of those are HGH boosters. TB 500, still not available through the licensed pharmacies. Thymosin alpha 1, dihexa, MOTS-C. So these are all peptides that all have great clinical data on, in terms of trials that they've used, and they get really good results. But at this point, these are still what we call gray market peptides. So gray market means the only way you can get it is kind of sort of illegal, where you're just ordering it online and you're attesting legally with your purchase that you're using it for research purposes only. So this is clearly problematic, and it's not something that any of us physicians can really recommend. And if you think about it, a lot of these companies, you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know whether it really is what's on the label. You don't know if the dosing is correct. You don't know if it's coming from China. You don't know really what it is. So I always tell people is, if you're interested in these peptides, obviously you want to figure out which one you want, and then definitely wait until one of our good high quality compounding pharmacies can get you these products. So for right now, we are still restricted, but we're working on adding some of these back. And then the final thought is just, if you are kind of new to this field of peptides, and if you're asking yourself, what about these peptides? Should I use them? I always tell people the best analogy to think of them is, let's just say you buy a brand new pickup truck and you're really excited about this pickup truck, but then someone says to you, your best friend says, hey, I think you should get some accessories for your truck. Like, what do you mean? What is this accessories stuff? Well, that's kind of like peptides. What kind of accessory do you want for your truck? Do you want something that's gonna, you want a truck bed liner? Do you want a hitch? Do you want, whatever you want for your truck? It's the same type of thing for the peptides. So you got to sort of figure out, what are your goals? Which peptide is going to help you reach your goal? And I will say, have reasonable expectations, because peptides are not going to turn you into Superman or Wonder Woman or make you feel 20 years younger overnight. They just don't usually do that. But they can have some really, really cool, good results within a focus of what the function is that you're looking for. So stay tuned on this. We are waiting to hear back from the FDA in coming months about which peptides are going to come back to the combined pharmacies. But for right now, we like what we have. We're just looking forward to having a lot more of them become available. So I hope this update helps. Here's to your health.